You've attended council hearings in person. You've tuned into our televised proceedings on Channel 13. Now, you have the chance to listen to us on the radio as we demystify our work and the people who do it. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council with your host, Josh Gibson.
Thank you, deep voiced person with a funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications for the Council. You may also know me as the Council's voice on social media at Council of DC. And we are thrilled once again for our first show of 2025 and of Council Period 26 to once again be back with Ward 1 Council Member and my personal Council Member, Brianne Nadeau. Thanks, Council Member. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Josh.
And the excuse me, the theme of today's show is keeping in the theme of Happy New Year is we're going to hear a little bit about your plans for 2025, because just like we all have our personal resolutions and things we're going to do differently in the new year and new doors that are opening, it's no different for council members. And you have a brand new 2-year council period to go at, and love to hear a little bit about what your plans are.
Well, yeah, it's very exciting. Fresh start. We got a lot of work done at the end of the year in Council Period 25. So it's nice to be able to start fresh, and we don't have a lot in my committee that we've got to turn back to and repeat. And so that's always exciting. So I continue to be the chair of the Committee on Public Works and Operations. And with DPW as the centerpiece of that committee, I've been really glad to be able to focus on parking enforcement as a means for road safety, whether that has been adding more towing cranes and booting crews and parking enforcement officers to go after what we call scofflaws, people who have unpaid tickets for various violations, or the work that we are doing also to keep our neighborhoods clean. This is a big thing for me. There's a real large environmental piece of what the Department of Public Works does. It's not just about collecting trash. It's also about ensuring recycling ends up where it needs to go. And the new composting pilot, which is diverting all of our food waste out of landfills. And that's a huge goal for our zero waste plan here in the District of Columbia. DPW was about to roll out some new smart compost bins all around the city. 3 in Ward 1, I believe, where people can put their compost any time of day. They just walk out, open the box, and pop it in there. They don't have to wait to take it to a farmer's market or have to be in the pilot. So we've got a lot of great stuff going on in the committee, and then got some big bills that I'm introducing this year as well.
Okay, well, first, why don't we start with the new bills, and then we'll circle back to planned future action on the bills from the end of last council period. So pick one. Tell us one of the bills you're most excited to get introduced.
One of the things that I'm really excited about is that next week, so mid-January, we're going to be introducing the bottle bill. This is a bottle deposit for beverages. So in a lot of parts of the country right now, when you buy your soda or other beverage at the store, you pay a deposit, and when you return that bottle or can, you get that deposit back. And what that does is it ensures that people are recycling. And it also ensures that those containers can be reused or repurposed back into beverage containers. A lot of people don't realize that only 8% of plastic is recycled across the world. And that's because a lot of it gets contaminated in single stream recycling. Once a beverage container has been in the same bin as, say, a bleach bottle, it's never going to be a beverage container again because it's just not safe. You can't guarantee those chemicals wouldn't get into your drink. And that's a problem that every single stream recycling program has in the country. It's not just here in the District of Columbia. What we know is that the reason we even have that 8% of plastic being recycled is because of container deposit programs. So it's time to have one here in the District of Columbia. There has been one in the past, although it's somewhat enigmatic. There are people who remember it from growing up here, but nobody remembers why it went away or when it went away. And so it's just going to be a mystery that we haven't been able to solve. It seems like everybody who remembers it was a child at the time, and so maybe wasn't so attuned to the politics of what happened to make it go away. But they remember collecting those cans and bottles and getting their 10 cents or 5 cents and using it for pocket change. And so we're really excited to bring it here to back to the District of Columbia. So there's a really strong coalition of people working on this. There's a lot of support for it east of the river because as much work as the District of Columbia has done on getting plastic bags out of the river with the bag fee, banning plastic straws and getting those out of the river, banning polystyrene and takeout containers, reducing the amount of plastic utensils being used for takeout, there's still this proliferation of plastic bottles in the river and our streams. And our volunteers and our river keeper are constantly having to pull those out, literal tons of them. And the best way to stop that is to make those items valuable to people so that they will bring them back. I'm really pumped about this.
So on the details of it, so is this would be plastic bottles and glass bottles, and would cans also be involved?
Yes, it includes all beverage containers except for cartons and pouches because they're not recyclable. It does have some exclusions for milk and milk substitutes and baby formula and then medications, but otherwise it's all beverages.
Is it even like wine bottles and
Yeah, that glass is actually really important. It's harder and harder to get glass as a manufacturer. And so I think that this making sure that we are getting that back in a way that can be reused. Glass actually is one of the only substances that the more you use it, the stronger it gets. So once it's melted down, every time after it gets a little stronger. And what happens in single stream recycling right now is it just all goes in the back of the truck and then it gets crushed. So if you go to, say, a sorting facility to see how everything is moving through the machines, there's just a sad little pile of glass sitting in the corner, getting ready to either become landfill cover or road cover. And that's not the spirit of recycling that so many of us, like me in our 40s that grew up as the recycling generation, teaching our parents the importance of it and seeing it emerge as a curbside option in our communities. That's not what you picture when you put something in that bin. You want to believe that it has a next stage, that it's going back into the reuse economy. It just doesn't happen. It's not real. So the bottle bill actually helps with that glass problem as well, which I'm very excited about.
What there are some states that do this and there are some states that don't do this. So why do the states that do it, and why do the states that don't do it not do it?
I grew up in Michigan, which has had a 10-cent deposit my whole life. And there, I don't remember a time when it didn't have it, right? So there was a movement, an environmental movement around that time. The states that have it have typically just had it for a very long time. I don't think there's been a new bottle deposit in like 30 years. And that's because the big industries like the beverage industry just prefers their own way of handling recycling, and they don't want governments to tell them what to do. What the data shows internationally, not just in the United States, is that if you really do want these containers back and you want them back in a way that they can be reused, you have to do the deposit. So, it's a very political thing. It is certainly going to be a challenge to get this passed because there will be a very strong and well-funded opposition to it. I think the more that we center this in the environmental cause of protecting our river and also the rest of our community, because we see them on the ground too, not just in the waterways, right? The more successful we'll be. And I think it really does speak to this next generation of activists who are so focused on the environment and the planet. So I'm hoping that we prevail this time.
And in terms of bringing the bottles and the cans back, would the grocery stores again be the drop-off spot? Would they be the only drop-off spot?
Great question. So the bill puts the Department of the Environment in charge, and there are requirements. There have to be a certain number of return locations in each ward. We talk a lot at the council about the grocery desert east of the river. We have to make sure we don't perpetuate that by only having grocery stores be the redemption sites. We will be instituting a handling fee for any entity that wants to do the collection. And the way the law is drafted, or is either required to or wants to do the collection. But the way that the law is drafted is that everybody who sells the containers has to collect the containers. There is one exception, and that is a square footage exemption that is meant to exclude corner stores, which I worry just may not have the space. That said, the goal is for the handling fee to be attractive. And a corner store or grocery store, whoever's collecting, very may well decide to use a reverse vending machine where the consumer simply brings their bottles and cans and pops them in the machine, and then they get a little voucher to shop. It creates foot traffic. It's not very cumbersome. It doesn't require any additional staff time to sort, serviced by the company that owns the machine. And it's a great modern day solution to bottle redemption. There'll also be redemption centers for larger volume. So that could be, say, a small business that breaks into this market and decides they're going to do collection for, say, a number of small businesses or apartment buildings or whoever they want to work with, or they're taking that volume over to the redemption centers. So we're building out a whole system, and it's really exciting because it's going to create jobs. It's going to help build out our green economy, which is growing everywhere in the world. And I like the idea that the District of Columbia can be part of that.
And the money that's going back to the collection spots, is that self-funding? Is that money that comes from the sale of the raw materials back to the bottle makers, or is that just out of general fund?
Great question. So some of that, like raw materials, et cetera, happens off screen. But the way it'll work is there's something called the Producer Responsibility Organization. It's set up by the distributors under our law. And that entity sets up all the infrastructure, manages all the deposit funds, and essentially is the entity running the program. The Department of the Environment oversees them in a regulatory way, but the Department of the Environment doesn't run the program. And this is pretty common. As newer programs are being set up for producer responsibility, this is how they tend to work. So we feel like we're not reinventing the wheel here, but it'll be new for us and it'll be new for our economy and our ecosystem here. There is something called unredeemed deposits. That's where not everybody turns in their bottles or cans. That money's been paid, so they're just not getting their deposit back. And those funds will be in a pot. And 25% of that goes to the Producer Responsibility Organization that manages the program. 75% comes back to the Department of the Environment. And they can use that for any costs related to the program, although we expect those will be minimal, maybe a staff person or two. And then the rest goes in the river fund, similar to the way that the bag fee does.
And so that money will be siloed, so it won't get pawed into for other government expenses.
That's right.
Gotcha. And if you had any feedback from retail, I know you haven't introduced the bill yet, but any conversations with retailers to see how they feel about being part of this process?
I have. It was really important to me to have a lot of those conversations before introduction because I also wanted to hear from them what their experiences have been. Say, for example, with the grocery stores that are chains, what does it look like in states you already do this in, right? And so we got to talk through some of their concerns and also just their experiences so we could have a better picture of how it would work here in the District of Columbia. For example, a lot of times a grocery store will locate reverse vending machines right in their entryway. And they want to make sure that they don't get gross from all these people putting empties in there. Because that's the gateway to their store, right? That's their front door. So we talked through how the technology works and what it does. These reverse vending machines are very interesting. They're self-contained, so the bottles go back in there and then they stay in the container until they're emptied. So it's not like you have a rat problem or that sort of thing. So yeah, it was good. I like hearing people's ideas before we finish putting pen to paper, because then we can incorporate things, and we've been able to do that um, for some of the small businesses.
And have you had any outreach with like social service agencies? Because it is an interesting, I know from growing up in Massachusetts, you see folks very diligently collecting the cans and the bottles, which is a good thing. It's an entrepreneurship, it's a revenue generation, but there will certainly be people who see that collection happening and the people with the big carts full of cans and bottles and will look askance on that. So I don't know how social service agencies that work with that clientele, how they would feel if they'd see it as a great opportunity or a challenge, or what are your any thoughts on that, or any experience reaching out to them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think we fully expect there will be this sort of, they call them canners, a canner entrepreneur industry here in the District of Columbia, whether that's young people saving money. I've talked to a lot of young people who are excited about this bill, actually.
I remember
Um,
when I was a
you're,
kid. Yeah.
yeah, grab the wagon, pick up litter, make some money, right? I actually think, yes. And, I do think that the District of Columbia is a place where there's a lot of very compassionate people who understand the need to support people experiencing homelessness or, otherwise unhoused, and people with, differing socioeconomic statuses. And, my hope is that folks will encourage that, right? I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as a natural um, piece of this bill. And if that means we have more people helping us get litter up off the street that then doesn't go down the storm drains and into the river, then I think it's a good thing. If it also allows people a little bit of economic independence, then I think it's even better. And so it's great. I mean, kids get this. We get a lot of letters from students at the council, and a lot of times there'll be a letter about litter from a student who's like, why don't we just, have a bottle deposit so people who need money can pick up the bottles and cans, and then, they're also not litter. It's like, duh, right? Children don't overthink. They give you the simplest, most straightforward answer, and it's usually the one that involves the most common sense.
Right. And a quick plug. I'm into battery returning batteries, which I know there's no deposit for, but I know that I think we already mandate that anyone who sells batteries has to take back batteries when they're dead, so that they don't end up polluting the environment. And I get the sense that's not happening. I'm sure there's a backstory in it, but that's one of my pet peeves, that I wish there were more battery drop-off spots.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you've seen in the past couple years the way that it's an extended producer responsibility mandate in the District of Columbia. For example, you can now take them back to any Ace Hardware, which is super convenient for a lot of people because there's so many of them.
Right.
In your area, you've also got Because Science taking them back, but I personally feel like it is more challenging than it should be to recycle electronics. It's been exacerbated by the fact that we are currently renovating um, one of our transfer stations managed by DPW. So when Benning Road is up back online, I think we can reevaluate. But in the meantime, the electronic waste collection happens for the big stuff that you can't just take back to the hardware store in these special events that are either at RFK or Carter Barron. You have to plan ahead. You have to be able to transport them. And I personally don't feel like we're doing enough to collect e-waste. So that's definitely one of my um, pet peeves right now that I want to keep pushing on. But yeah, battery is a little easier now because of the hardware stores.
Right. I just love to see CVS and Safeway and, folks like that are making good money.
Oh, I
Sell
see what you're saying.
batteries also
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
drop-off depots.
No, that'd be good. Well,
That's for another day.
once we get the bottles and the cans being redeemed, maybe we'll tack that on. We'll be like, and another thing,
And another thing.
and another thing.
Uh, Let me quickly pivot to another idea that I know you have for this term, which is neighborhood management agencies, which is, if I'm understanding it, is kind of a business improvement district that is a more of a collaborative neighborhood opportunity for residents and businesses to act jointly. Talk to me about that, because I think that's has a lot of potential.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so one thing that we know is that neighborhoods thrive when they have resources. So that's, someone to coordinate cleaning services in public space, substance use disorder outreach, business promotion and support. And Ward 1 is really special in the sense that we are like a bunch of commercial corridors that have residents living around them, right? There's not a whole lot of residential turf in Ward 1 that isn't distinctly connected to a commercial corridor within blocks. And that's very particular to our ward because we're so dense. We have one bid in Ward 1, the Adams Morgan partnership bid, that I know you've been very involved with over the years. And it's a blessing to have that bid. And what we need in other parts of the ward that have a lot going on, like U Street and Columbia Heights, is that sort of management. Now, bids are one model, but the model that I've come up with actually is a little bit more community oriented. It has government representatives, business representatives, property owners, neighbors, ANCs. And it also, runs like a nonprofit, but it's a quasi-governmental entity. It's an instrumentality of the government is the phrase. And it has bonding authority. It can carry a reserve for U Street, for example. We anticipate it being the property management entity for the Lincoln Theater and the Howard Theater, and really making sure that they're getting the resources they need. Kind of like the way Events DC does for the convention center and the entertainment and sports arena. They operate with a reserve, they manage those properties with a partner, and it works really well. So originally started this idea for U Street because for many years people have tried to create a bid to support U Street. I mean, since before my time, even on the ANC, they've tried and it just hasn't come together. And really looked around at what all the models are out there. And, we have main streets, we have bids, but we don't have this type of model in the District of Columbia, where some other places, even in the region, do, like Bethesda. And I think it better supports the community than the traditional bid, because it involves more voices. And traditional bids are focused on property owners because it's funded by a property assessment, right? So the people paying in are the ones who have the most skin in the game, who have the loudest voices. What's really cool about this, so for the U Street part, I launched a performance parking zone that's all the parking revenue is going to go to start this up. So people coming to visit U Street pay the market price for parking, which is a lot more than we normally charge. It goes up to $8 on in evenings, like when people are out at the clubs. And then in Columbia Heights, we have that parking garage where we can capture the revenue. And it doesn't cover the whole cost. We don't expect it will, but it means that you don't have to rely on taxing everybody in the area to run it. And I think that just takes the edge off. Everybody involved gets to start from the place of we're coming together for a common purpose, and we want to make our community as strong as it can be. And I'm not here only because someone forced me to pay a tax. So that's the thinking.
And then where would the remaining revenue come from that doesn't come from the parking revenue?
So they do have the ability to do the self-taxation, and they may do that at a much lower rate than you would ever do for a bid. I think there'll also be more traditional fundraising. So for example, there's some big development projects going on in the Duke district for U Street. So that's an opportunity for those entities to contribute. There's just like the sky's the limit. And I guess just putting that seed money in is what really kicks it all off. So I'm very excited about it. It's, as you can tell, I haven't exactly nailed down the flashy talking points. It's very wonky and insider government speak. Working on that, trying to get a little better every day, so we can really share it with the public. And but we've been out talking to all the ANCs about it. I've talked to property owners and business owners. There's so many people to talk to, so it's an ongoing thing. But I'll be introducing that later this month as well. And those are probably that and the bottle bill, I think, are the two very big heavy lifts I would consider that I'm hoping to get done this year.
Now, I know with bids, one of the things that people that are not in bid world question they ask is, shouldn't the government be doing this? Why are we, they call it duplicating services, which we in the bid world are always very clear to say that we're supplementing and not supplanting government services. That, you know, when the sidewalks get cleaned, cleaning of sidewalks is already not a government responsibility. It's a property owner responsibility. And all we're doing is collectivizing it and putting it with the bid to make sure it gets done 100% across the board. Do you anticipate getting any criticism? It sounds like this is a more sort of obviously private focused and less replacing, less likely to be charged with replacing government services. But what is your take on that?
So here's the thing that to me is very clear. What we have right now in Columbia Heights and what we have on U Street is just not working. It's not serving the community the way it needs to be served. So you can't look at what the government has been capable of and say, yes, that's it. That's what we needed. Thank you for being there, government. You can't expect a government to have a neighborhood level focus the way that these neighborhoods need. It's just not feasible. I wish it was, right? I wish you could have a deputy mayor for Columbia Heights and a deputy mayor for U Street. And, it's just not the way government works. And frankly, even if it was, I think the community deserves to have more of a voice in the day-to-day operations of the neighborhood. So the reason I like this model is because it's bringing resources that are sorely needed to neighborhoods that have desperately needed them for decades. There was always a bid contemplated for Columbia Heights anyway. So I don't think there was ever a question that something needed to be there to manage. And even when I was an ANC on U Street, people were like, this is a destination. Why is it not being managed like a destination? Right? I mean, there's such a knee-jerk reaction to like, oh, of course we need a downtown bid and we need a downtown this and we need a downtown that. Well, what you learn as when you're representing Ward 1 is that we have like our own little downtowns that are just as important to the economy of the city, if not more so, in the sense that people feel very personally connected to them. And they deserve just as much attention and focus as the downtown corridor does.
Yeah. And the challenge is always, particularly with Ward 1 neighborhoods, living in one, is that when you're trying to organize downtown around this kind of principle, you get kind of 10 guys around the table and you're 90% of the way there. Mm-hmm. Whereas our neighborhoods, the whole appeal of them is their scrappiness and their mom and pop nature. And that's a blessing and a curse, when you're trying to put together this kind of organization effort, that there's so many people to bring to the table, and every one of them has three opinions.
I believe the phrase you're looking for is it's like herding cats.
Yeah, it is. That it is the greatest joy and the greatest struggle of life in Ward 1 in particular. But it sounds like this is an opportunity for everyone to come together at the same table and chip away a bit at that business versus resident perpetual civil war that a lot of times some of us grew up on.
And it's a bit of an equity thing too. So as much as I love the Adams Morgan bid, the complaints you always get are from the smaller businesses that don't feel like their voices are being represented on the board or in the operations or where the money is going to, right? I mean, I think the bid does a great job. But I think that's that's the easiest criticism is all the big guys are in charge. Um, and that's just the way bids are designed, right? They're about property owners paying in to ensure that their investments are protected in the form of community development, right? Community management. It's not a criticism. It's just a reality. And even if you look at some of the analysis, there's, the most recent bid that was formed, I think some of the racial equity analysis was like, this is going to perpetuate inequity. So I do think that trying this model is good. I've actually met with the bid council on this and they're excited about it. They don't see it as competition. They're like, this is great. This is like another tool for our city because they also agree bids aren't for everything.
Right. Yeah. And already, like you say, we have an ecosystem where there's main streets, where there's business associations. There's just so many layers and so many different ways to kind of slice the pie. And this seems like the most sort of collaborative of the lot.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I mean, it's almost like I feel like at the end of the day, we're gonna have done this whole rollout and people are gonna be like, yeah, okay, so just do it. Right? Like, I don't think it's gonna end up being a whole knockdown, drag out debate. I think they're gonna be like, do you really feel like you need our permission to do this? Like, can we just like do a management authority and keep it moving? But of course, that's not how legislation works. We'll do a hearing and most likely the business community and business committee at the council and then get everybody's feedback and mark it up and people have opinions about where the maps are drawn and what things are called and but I'm optimistic. I think this is one of those things where as the ward council member hopefully I'll get the benefit of the doubt from a lot of my colleagues about this is what I think Ward 1 needs and have their support.
And then what do you think the future is for the model citywide? I know you have a couple particular tough nuts to crack with Columbia Heights and U Street, how to manage and organize them. But is this something that you see like bids eventually going citywide?
I think it could. Here's what's one of the things that I think is appealing to a lot of people is that when you're capturing parking revenue and rededicating it to the very neighborhood it's being collected in, that's a good feeling, right?
Right.
I think it's a good model. I mean, we also have to ensure, of course, there's always enough money in the coffers of the general fund. We don't want to start chipping away at that for everything, but I think it makes sense in these cases. And to the extent that that's feasible in other places, we should have at it.
Right. And that was always a selling point for the bids, that it is local money captured and spent locally, that, you pay
That's right.
taxes and it could go anywhere in the city, but at least with the bid revenue, that it's being captured and put back to use in your own neighborhood.
That's right. Exactly.
That is a strong selling point. Okay, so we are out of time for our main topic, and we're going back for the fun round. We're going back to the well. We're doing the odd tasks. Which colleague would you pick for which task and why?
Oh, God.
Which we've done a number of times before, and it can be past or present colleagues.
Oh, God. Can I raise anyone from the dead? No, just kidding. Okay.
So which council member would you pick to help shovel your sidewalk?
Probably Wendell, because he's got that big freshman energy.
Yeah, exactly. And he's just a tall dude. So
He's tall.
yeah, that would help.
And he's got a kid, so he knows how to get stuff done.
Okay. Now from one extreme to the other, if you got a meeting with the new administration coming in, presidential administration, and you wanted to stick up for DC, defend DC, and ensure our future would be strong, given the new circumstances we're entering into for 4 years, which colleague would you take to that meeting?
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. You know what? I think I'd take Ginny's.
And why her?
Because she has spent her whole life in service to the District of Columbia and is a native Washingtonian who knows how to convey the importance of the stories of the people here in the District of Columbia.
Okay, that makes sense. Who would you co-teach a college class with?
Well, you know, Robert's doing that now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe you just guest teach his class.
Maybe. I mean, he's already done the syllabus, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's law school. That's kind of heavy.
Yeah, that is intense.
I don't know. Maybe Phil, because I'd like to interject humorous quips throughout his lectures.
Yeah. He's always seemed like a university professor in the making his whole life. So I think it's
Yeah, I do it for the trolling.
yeah. It sounds familiar to me. That might be my job. Now, who would you like to go to a museum?
Let's see. Who'd I like to go to a museum with?
Could be because they'd be helpful. Could be because it'd be entertaining. Depth of
I
knowledge.
think I'd like to go with Anita.
And any particular museum or reason why, or
I like to go with Anita because she often reminds me to slow down and like contemplate things a little bit more.
okay. And the last one, put on a puppet show.
Oh. Christina. She's probably got the most experience with it.
Yeah. Although we're, from a council that didn't have a lot of parents of young children, would definitely have flipped the script there.
No, it's like Toddler City.
Yeah, it's totally true. We could do our own daycare.
We could.
But okay, well, we're as always beyond out of time. But thanks as always for humoring me with the fun round and the policy piece. So listeners, remember to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search under Hearing the Council. Thanks again for joining us. Tune in next time. We're on DC Radio at 96.3 on your FM HD4 dial or at dcradio.gov. I'm Josh Gibson. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. Thanks, council member. I really appreciate it. Good talking.
See you later.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.